Welcome to the Exoduscry podcast, where we have honest conversations around exploitation, trafficking, sexual culture, and justice.
Today on the Exoduscry podcast, we're joined by Vanessa Russell, founder of Love Never Fails. Through education, safe housing, and job training, her organization is making a profound difference in the anti-trafficking movement. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Vanessa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank
We're
you.
so happy that you're here just to talk with us, talk with me. I had a chance to be on a panel with you after a screening of Buying Her.
Yes.
And which you reminded me of today, but I remember that being on that panel and just you're very, very well researched in the space of trafficking.
Yeah.
And I know you run an organization, you have your own story. I'd love to just kind of jump in with hearing a little bit of the background of who you are, what your story is, how you got involved in this work, and just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So I founded an organization 13 years ago called Love Never Fails. We started out in the San Francisco Bay Area and in San Leandro Hayward area. And now we're sort of in a national footprint, namely around our IT academy that we have. We started because I was teaching inner city kids dance while I was working in the tech world and doing it on a voluntary basis on Friday nights. And one of my 15-year-old dance students, unfortunately, was raped in Hayward, California, and then sold throughout the state for a year. And so it ties pretty distinctly into my personal story because I was in foster care as a baby. I went through a lot of abuse, poverty, sexual trauma, molestation, just a whole wide range of things as I was growing up. And really, I didn't have very many plans to live into my adult life. I didn't know what that was going to look like. But I was I didn't grow up in church. And, now I'm a pretty, strong, I'm a strong believer. But at that, as I was growing up, didn't really know too much about God. And I really got a lot of strength to go on from the arts and from learning. I love school. And so that really paved the way for me to be able to go to college and explore some of my interests, and then landed a role in tech, and achieved a level of economic sustainability that I had never known. None of my family members have ever known. So just really transformed our lives. But I wanted to go and give back to kids and young people that were like me, that came from the same background as me. Once I came to know the Lord, and I started teaching dance at a church. And again, this happened to my student while I was teaching kids dance at a church. And I was dumbfounded because I'm like, look, I'm in church. I'm not in the streets like I used to be. And this happened. And, when you come from the trauma background that I came from, you don't want to be involved in,
It's too
traumatic.
Triggering,
it's triggering.
Yeah.
So at first I was like, this is too much for me. Like I've worked really hard to get to this place of economic sustainability. I'm the only one that is kind of pulling my family up financially. And so it was quite a challenge to accept that I needed to take all of the things that I had learned as a young person, as a teenager, as a young adult, all the ways that I learned how to learn, how to be successful in the tech world, and impart that to survivors of human trafficking. So anyway, going back to my student, I was able to, after a year's time, find her and help get her into a program. And then one of our volunteers adopted her, and she graduated from high school with honors.
Wow.
And she's 28 now. And She is, she's doing much, much better than she ever has been. Still struggles like many of us that are trauma impacted. But yeah, that's how I got started, and a little bit of how it kind of aligned with my personal life and story.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It is a thing of people falling through the cracks of our society. And foster care is such a huge, huge thing for your part and for that world. And something that's not often talked about with the trafficking problem in general. But I know there are so many people who come out of that system that end up in trafficking situations. And so, but your perceptiveness to recognize, this person who had been through this situation and to really like go after them. I love that you started there.
Yeah.
To be able to see the full trajectory of how that made such a radical, transformative difference in that person's life and who they are today. And it just makes me think of all the people out there, if they had somebody like you to just take notice of that pain, that isolation, that trauma, and like go after them, fight for them, how different our world would be. And so you started your organization, Love Never Fails. Talk more about that.
Yeah.
What that's all about.
Yeah. So interestingly, when I started, I was working in tech. I was a single mom. I had 2 children. I really was not in a place to go full board with an organization. I mean, in fact, I resisted starting the organization for many months because I felt ill-equipped. I was not an educator. I was not a clinician. I was a tech nerd working in the tech, world. And I'm just like, what could I possibly do except that I have a trauma background? Like, what could I possibly do? And I remember there was a time where I was just praying and crying a lot, like every night. It was like 4 months straight. I would just cry because my student was out there and I didn't know where she was. And I would cry and pray. And all I got was, and that's where the name of the organization came from. Just, love her. I will reveal to you everything that you need to know as you move through. But the main thing is just love her every day, in every circumstance, in every situation. When you hear things that are scary, when you hear things that are upsetting, just love her. And so that has really been my guiding principle. And of course, that kind of love is a love that does not fail, because you're not looking for anybody to perform. It's not performance-based. You're not looking for anyone to be someone they're not. You're meeting people where they are. You're taking time to understand them and have empathy for them. And so that was the genesis of Love Never Fails. And from there, for about 5 years, we were a volunteer-led organization. And what we did was, there were about 75 or so of us, all volunteers, including myself, going out doing street outreach in the middle of the night, meeting with girls that were being sold, people that are out on the street being sold on tracks or blades where people are sold in San Francisco and Oakland and Stockton and Sacramento, all over the place. And we would go up to them and offer them a bracelet that says "You are loved" on it. And it actually has some contact information on it that allows them to connect with us. And so we'd offer that to them. And we also did a bunch of community education. We did walks, organized walks in what people are calling the, sex trafficking districts in Oakland today. Back then, it wasn't nearly as accepted as it is today, but we walked up and down that street off of Fruitvale and International and in Oakland and just raised the red flag that this was going on and it wasn't okay with a bunch of us. There were about 400 of us out there. And so that was the first 4 years, a lot of grassroots community activism, education of churches, community schools. And then what happened is we kept encountering people that started to know my name, and they'd say, Miss Vanessa, if you had a house, I'd get off the street. And when are you going to get a house? And I have a kid, and my daughter's being held in a hotel. And until I make my quota, I can't go collect my daughter. But I can't just come off the street and have no way to provide for me and my daughter. And so there was a moment where I had a 19-year-old and I had I believe she was 17, who were being trafficked both. And one of them had a 5-month-old baby and the other one was pregnant. And it was late Friday evening. And they came to me and they said, we have nowhere to stay for the weekend. Do you have like a hotel you could put us in, this, that, and that, And we didn't have any budget. We didn't have any funding. Started calling around the housing authority and saying, hey, these 2 girls want to just like get away from it all and they want to come into a hotel. Do we have anything? No, we gave out all of our vouchers for today. There's nothing. And then I was just going to put them in a hotel. And one of them said, no, it's okay, Miss Vanessa. We found somewhere we're going to stay with family. I said, all right. So the next weekend, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday the next week, I touched base with them and I reached out to one of them and I said, hey, how's it going? And she said, horrible. She said, over the weekend we stayed at someone's house and they dropped the 5-month-old baby and he died. And that like wrecked me. And I remember going to his funeral and thinking, I cannot not open a house. I will not be in this situation again where a young lady comes to me with a baby and has nowhere to go. And I have to turn her away or hesitate to take her off the street. And so from that point forward, I just started telling everybody I could find. I went to just anyone, philanthropic people, and I said, please help me open our first home. And I remember there was a philanthropist in San Francisco and I told her what happened. And she literally wrote me a personal check for $75,000.
Come on.
I was like, whoa, I have never had that happen in my whole life. And, I was just like, and I literally had another person from Oakland. I could mention her name, Maddie Green from Allen Temple Street Disciples. She came to me and she was like, I don't know, I've been looking at this place, but I don't feel like it's for me. She gave me the address of the place. She gave me the rental contract. She gave me a grant that I could apply for. Boom, 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 handed it all to me. I think this place is for you. I went and met with the landlord and I told the landlord, I don't have that much money for that. I don't have enough money for, what you're charging. He said, I tell you what, I'm going to give it for you. I'm going to give it to you for what you have. And he knocked off for $40,000 off of my lease. And so I was able to open up that house.
Wow.
Within 7 weeks of that horrible incident, 7 weeks, I opened up a fully furnished 5-bedroom home for women and children, brand new pristine house with brand new floors, never been lived in, freshly built, beautiful furniture, all of it donated from like people. And I just say this because, again, I come from a poverty background, so I was willing to throw whatever I could throw into that house, secondhand stuff, grab stuff from here and there,
Totally.
Make it work. No. People were donating Pottery Barn level things.
Wow.
They had a china closet and they had a beautiful china and they had beautiful ottomans and everything was leather. And I just couldn't help but feel like God was saying, I want the very best for my daughters. They're not going to get secondhand this and that. Not that there's something wrong with that, but anyway, it was just a beautiful time. And on the first day that we were opened, every single room was filled with women and their children. First day that we opened, just like that.
Wow. That really speaks to kind of the scope of the problem that we're talking about, of people falling through the cracks, that we, right from the outset, is just it's an interesting way of thinking about our society through that lens.
Yeah.
Because I love what Louis, I can't pronounce his last name, he's a National Geographic photographer. He says, you're either an activist or an inactivist. And the thing is, we live in a world where people are constantly falling through the cracks. It takes a lot of intentionality to become an activist.
Yeah.
But in your case, it was so simple and so natural and such a just human response to things, situations that were right in front of you.
Yeah.
And I just love your story, how your simple yes, like amounted to, you know, this incredible change for people. And just, I can't help but think of how God really honored that yes with bringing it all together, the house and everything. And
Everything.
like you said, it's not just about having new furniture, but there are those times when I think God really blesses as a gesture of value.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
I was on this Jesuit retreat, and the spiritual director talked about this idea of how a gesture gives meaning to a thing. And so like the idea of, you know, if you hand somebody, if you say, I love you to somebody or love you, is different than if you hand them 24 red roses and say, I love you. Like that gesture adds meaning to the words.
Absolutely.
And I think that in your guys' case, just that gesture of like, God wants you to have his best. Like you are not a second-class citizen. You are the apple of his eye. And I can just feel in everything you're sharing how you guys communicate that value to the people that you work with.
Yeah.
And I think that's so amazing. I'd love if you would just elaborate on, okay, so the house fills and how does that all go from there?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure it was perfect and just mountaintop to mountaintop the whole way.
No. Well, what happened was we started to design this program organically, and that was what was called the phase 1 house. And then some of the women started to reach a time around the 1 year mark. It was an 18-month program. And around the 1 year mark, it was like, I want to have more liberty than a phase 1 house is providing me. And it's kind of interesting, actually. Our phase 1 now is 30 days where people don't have phones and they don't have full access to computers without somebody monitoring what they're doing, because we've learned the hard way about some of those things. And because there are exploiters that are literally hunting down the people that are in the program. It used to be, I want to say, I can't remember if it was 8 months or 12 months where it was called a blackout. And then they would transition after that first home. We designed a second home that was the phase 2 house. And so they would move from phase 1 to this other home where they had more liberty and it was more about independent living. And so now we had 2 houses to juggle, and live-in staff for each. And
I love that progression.
Yeah.
They're so like thoughtful to their journey.
Yeah.
And just that's such an extravagant thing to do, to meet them where they're at in these different stages. And just
that was it. That
what they
was the
need.
thing.
Yeah.
Is like really a lot of asking, a lot of watching, and like, what do you need? Where are you at right now? Well, I'm kind of feeling, they would tell us, I'm kind of feeling like this is a jail now, because what used to be a safe haven when I first came, where I was glad that no one here had phones and, you know, and no one was coming and going and potentially bringing exploiters in. But now I want to be able to explore and meet my friends and do things. And so it's like, oh, we've got a shift. And so we made our phase 1 house 6 months, then we brought it down to 3 months, and now it's 1 month. And that's working really well. But even then, we have very strict rules about use of technology and engaging with people outside, and location services, and, you know, geotagging and all. I mean, we have a lot of tech, and that has to do with my tech background, where we're looking at a lot of things to make sure people are safe. And then our homes are all video surveillance everywhere, and we just make sure. But these were things that we had to learn over time. I mean, there was no playbook about any of this. And so now fast forward here, 13 years later, we have a home for previously incarcerated men, a home for men who have been trafficked or are homeless with their children. We have a home for girls ages 12 to 17, 2 homes for women and their children. And then we have an outreach center, which is a home that allows people who want to learn how to do outreach. They can live there. And so it's interesting because a lot of our graduates are actually transitioning into the outreach center. So it's almost turning into like a phase 3 home where they're learning how to give back after they've been in the program.
Was that 6?
Yes. Yeah. So.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. 47 beds.
Incredible.
It's mind blowing. And, yeah. And so, and again, all of it organically unfolding. We had a friend of mine from SoCal actually gave me a call. She runs Global Hope 365, Rima Nashashimi, and she reached out to me. She says, I've got a guy, Homeland Security is holding him. He has nowhere to go. Labor trafficking victim. Can you receive him? I'm like, yeah. So we had looked at this home for a youth pastor who was homeless and thought, wow, there's a problem with like men who are working, not having a place to live, especially when they have children, which leaves your children susceptible to being trafficked and them susceptible to possible labor trafficking. So we started working on that, not realizing that we would start receiving referrals from Homeland Security, or recently we just got another referral from IRC, I believe it was, and that was a Chinese national who had basically was here on asylum because he was being persecuted in his home, and again, another labor trafficking, and you're just going, okay, I thought I was starting off with this, where I really thought this was going to be about like transitional age youth, girls predominantly Black and Latino from the Bay Area. That's what I had in my mind. And we've had, it was so cool because the first young man who came in, he was from Turkey. And so we were talking to him through Google Translate the whole time, doing his case notes over Google Translate. And it's like a love fest between us and him. Like, it's beautiful. And he's Muslim. The homes are run as Christian homes. Of course, people don't have to believe as the staff believe or do anything to earn being there. But the fact that someone who's Muslim could come and be in our homes and feel safe and loved and cared for, like that's a huge value of mine, because I want people to feel like they don't have to earn the love that we have to offer. Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
They get to experience unconditional love.
Yeah.
How have you seen, I'm just curious, how have you seen the concept of a home impact people and open their heart? And like, I guess I'm just thinking like the people who experience homelessness can experience it as something that is very, very traumatizing, in a way that I don't think we like understand. It's like, well, they'll just sleep over here. It's that feeling of not having a home, not having shelter. It creates such a desperate situation for someone.
Yeah.
And to be out of your home for one day creates a situation of desperation that would be very traumatizing to most people.
Yes.
And having worked in this space for a long time, very aware how few beds there are and how great the need is. And so I'm just curious, in your experience of like, what have you observed in the hearts of people who you're able to bless with having a roof over their head.
Yeah. Well, I want to share a few stories about that. But one thing I wanted to say is that, in California, we have 180,000 people that are unhoused right now. And this is one of the reasons why you've seen me advocating so strongly against, I have spiritual values that say sex trafficking and, sex work is not what God wants. It's not what people want. But that aside, even if I could make the argument that that's what people want, I would want to ensure that homelessness was not part of their story if they were making that choice. And I always talk about choice versus coercion. And I think it's very important that we understand that people make horrible choices when they have no choices. And so are those really choices? Or are those choices of no choices, right? And so until I met a woman who was, actually I didn't meet her, Heidi Gorky on our team. She met her and she told me about her. But she was a medical doctor who had decided to be, she called herself a sex worker, and she said that she just wanted to do that. I said, awesome. You're making that choice. You could be an MD. You've got money. You've got a beautiful house. This is what you choose to do. Have at it. And I believe, by the way, that's biblical, because everybody, the Lord does not force anybody to do anything. Right. He says, I offer you this, I offer you that. You make your decision, you make your choices. To me, her doing that, I don't know her trauma background. I don't know what has informed that decision. But economically, I could say that she's making that choice out of some possible other economic sustainability choices versus most of the people that are being trafficked are not. It's their only alternative, their only way to survive, or their only way to be loved, their only way to have shelter, to have a roof over their head. Some people are engaging in survival sex. We have people that are living in encampments, and to the plain eye, you just see a woman there and you see a bunch of people living in trailers and in tents and different things like that. But if you watch, you'll see her go around to different tents, because that's how she stays in that environment. And that's how she's accepted in that encampment, is that she's servicing everybody in the camp. And so, for me, where is the justice in that? Where is the choice? Where is the dignity that she gets to walk with when she has to do that, or when he has to do that? I wrote a book, Fight for Love, it's a 12-step recovery book for men. And one of the testimonials is of a man named Jimmy Ish. He's in there, and he talks about how when he was, strung out and unhoused, he had to have sex with various people, men and women, in the encampments and throughout the community so he could survive. And so this is happening, a lot more often than we realize. And being unhoused is often one of the root reasons or vulnerabilities that really open someone up to making that kind of decision.
I want to take a moment to tell you about a group that is very special to us. This group has helped us win decisive battles against the world's biggest porn site, compelling them to delete millions of videos suspected of containing criminally abusive content. Through our films, this group has helped change the way millions of people think about porn in the sex industry, inspiring viewers to stop allowing this industry to control their lives and harm others. This group has enabled women and girls bound in trafficking to be reached and offered a way of escape. The group has also helped survivors to find healing through trauma therapy so that they can build a new life. We call this group Abolition Partners, and their monthly donations are foundational to every breakthrough at exoduscry. As a nonprofit, our work is mostly funded by generous people like you with a passion for justice, who believe that together we can change the world. When you become an Abolition Partner, we'll send you a kit with our exclusive Abolitionist t-shirt, a DVD of our documentary on trafficking, Nefarious Merchant of Souls, and you'll get a free ticket to any new film we screen in theatres. Join us on the front lines of this fight and let's uproot trafficking and sexual exploitation from our world. You can get started at exoduscry.com/AP.
I don't know if you're familiar with Rachel Moore, and she wrote a book called Paid For.
Yeah.
And talked about the role of homelessness and her own journey of being lured into prostitution. And it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
But it's also not a thing you can just snap your fingers and make it go away. I mean, you mentioned some of the numbers. It's staggering out there. But it also really gives so much value to the little bit that is being done, you know, and just to bring it back to like what you guys are doing and just how powerful that is for the people who are beneficiaries of your good work. And so that's incredible. Before we transition, because I'd love to kind of hear your heart on what's happening here in the state of California legislatively and get into some of that as it pertains to trafficking. Anything else you want to say about the homes?
I wanted to tell you 2 stories because you had talked about experientially, like people coming in. One story coming into our houses. One story that popped up for me was the first couple that came into our home that allows men and women and their children to be in the home. And so the very first couple that came in had been homeless, living in their car for 5 years. I had worked with the woman who was a survivor of sex trafficking for about a year, and she hid that from me, that she was actually homeless, living in a car. Her husband was a labor trafficking survivor. So there they were living in this car, taking showers in, you know, different places in San Jose and throughout the Bay Area, and working and living in this car. And so when she told me, I said, well, why don't you come and be in our, you know, get in our house? And she's like, okay. And I had to like really convince her husband to come. And he wasn't sure about coming. Why? Because it's scary to rely on somebody, to trust somebody, to allow you to lay your head down and know that they're not going to make you do something, you know, to earn your keep. They're not going to kick you out tomorrow. They're not going to say you don't live up to my expectations, you can't be here. All of those things come up for people when, you know, they've been living in their car. They know what to expect. They know they have a routine. Now you're getting them out of their routine. And I remember her telling me, so there was this beautiful story where one of our staff, just at the same time that I made this offer, she calls me up and she goes, hey, we're getting a new bed. And the only thing we had was bunk beds in the house because it was supposed to be mostly for single guys and maybe their kids, maybe in a crib or a little baby bed, or they could be on one of the bunks. I wasn't really designed for couples, right? So she says, oh, we're in a new bed. And we have a queen and it's practically new. It's still in the plastic. She's like, do you know anyone who might need it? And I'm like, dude, we need that right now. And she's like, the only problem is I got to drop it off today. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're moving in tomorrow. Come. So they came, dropped it off. And that next night they slept in a bed for the first time in 5 years. Wow. And they said it was so uncomfortable. That was very eye-opening to me. They said all the noises made them uncomfortable. They were used to sleeping sitting up. And they had to get used to sleeping on a brand new queen size bed. So anyway, that blew me away when I heard that. And these are the things. These are the things that we might have this perception that like someone comes off the street and they just love it. You're giving them their toiletries and you're giving them their bed and it's beautiful and it's decorated nice. And they may cry and they may grieve and they may be sad and they may be depressed for weeks and months that someone has done such a kind act to them because it's never been done.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
It's like, I think of it like when all they know is an abusive situation and then they get into a healthy love situation and it's like so uncomfortable. Those feelings of safety, those feelings of unconditional love and acceptance. It's like, I only know performance. I only know punishment. I only know, and it's just so sad, how the human experience can vary so vastly from one person to another, and things that we take for granted. Some of us that we take for granted, could change somebody's life. And, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that we kind of realize that as we're doing this work, there's a whole lot of chase in this. Like, I literally, when the Bible says, I have chased you, I have sought you with a loving, I have pursued you with a loving kindness. There's a reason why that's there, because it's an outline for us.
Yeah.
We have to pursue people. We have to not give up on them. We have to they mess up. I've had so many girls, they start using, they leave. So many guys, they use, they leave. And I'm like, it's okay, girl. Just today I was on somebody's Facebook and she's back out there, and I was like, when you coming back? I miss you.
Yeah.
She's like, what? She wants me to come back? Yeah, I want you to come back. And we'll just keep doing it again and again and again until you get tired. Yeah.
Wow. You're such a gift to your community. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's amazing. Any other stories on that stuff? No. I mean, I'm sure you got a bunch of them.
I have a bunch.
Yeah.
No, I think.
Just to say too, men often get overlooked in this space. We're currently working on a documentary about female exposure to porn. And a big part of the reason that we wanted to do that is because that doesn't get talked about. And if you're a female who has a porn struggle, like, it's a very isolating experience, a very shame-based, stigmatizing, isolating experience, because porn is a man's issue, right? And so in a similar way, if you're a man who has experienced, trafficking or sexual abuse, it is framed as something that happens to women.
Yes.
And so there's a particularly isolating aspect of that for those men.
Yeah.
And I know I fail at giving mention to that enough. But there are those boys and men out there who have been sexually violated, who have been trafficked, and incarceration can also lead to a lot of those things as well. Sexual abuse.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just wanted to highlight that, because we kind of like passed over it, but that's really amazing that you guys are doing that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that has been a struggle for me, actually, on a personal level. I really wanted to keep things very much about women because of my own story and of abuse and trauma, and then the Lord really kept just pulling at my heart and saying, I want you to heal in this area. And so I started thinking about I wrote a book called Fight for Love for Women, for survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, and abuse. And I kept feeling this tug to write the same book, but for men. And I kept feeling like I didn't really have the right to do that. I'm not a man, and even my husband will say, oh no, you're biased against men. You kind of always see the man as the one who's doing things wrong, but sometimes the women are doing things, and there's a lot of men who have been abused by women or by other men. And we need to have a safe place for us to, share our story. And I was blessed to be able to hire our senior program manager over our houses now, Al Bernal, who I wrote the Fight for Love 12-step recovery book with. And he is a survivor of all kinds of trauma, previously incarcerated, substance abuse. And I always tell him, you're qualified. He's got all these things, and he's like, you want to hire me? I'm like, yeah, you're perfect. You're qualified. He's like, really? But anyway, so we wrote this book together, and it has 12 stories, testimonies of different men in it. And it aligns with the 12 steps of recovery. And the point is to destigmatize the sexual, physical, emotional abuse that men have endured. And my hope, and now that I'm on the other side of it, because I was like, oh, should I be doing this? Now that I'm on the other side of it and we've launched it, I'm so excited about fathers being restored to their families, about being, marriages being repaired, about people being able to get married, about people being able to make amends for things that they've done out of their own hurt. So it's been a very therapeutic project for me as well.
It's you have such a holistic view of humanity.
Yeah. And that's definitely a God thing, because I was not like that before. I'm serious. I mean, I was
You're like, I had a chip on my shoulder.
I was pretty jaded.
Yeah.
Growing
It's understandable.
Up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fact that I've moved in that direction I think it's Holy Spirit led.
As a man, thank you for having an empathetic view of the male experience as well.
Yeah.
It is easy to sit back and see some of the statistics and the dynamics and just really build a view of men based on that.
Right.
You know? And I remember having this epiphany one day because I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about this movement of men who have a analysis of women, we'll call it, that is, all women are this way.
Yeah.
Right. So just never trust a woman is kind of like the vibe kind of thing. And on either side, I see on the surface, like how women could end up in one place or men could end up in another place in terms of their view of the opposite gender.
Yeah.
But I think that the empathetic view is to see that underneath some of those commonalities that ones might point to is just a wounding and a brokenness and a hurting. And really what's needed is just to heal those things and to create space for each other to heal. And so I really appreciate your perspective. And I think that, every human, male or female, is so valuable and just worth fighting for. And I like that you guys create space for people to reconcile the wrongs they've done as well. That's so redemptive.
Yeah.
Like, we're not trying to throw you all away.
Nope.
We're trying to figure out how can we redeem what's been broken and get you back on your feet and moving forward in life. Because life's about evolution. It's about making mistakes, falling, getting back up, trying things on. Like, it's never one straight path. It's this circuitous path. And we can be so harsh and cruel with each other.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall into that. But mercy.
That's right.
Grace.
Yeah.
Like, we all need it.
Yes.
And you're such a beautiful expression of that to so many people. That's really amazing.
And I loved your movie, Buying Her. I think it did a really good job. And I brought survivors, with me to watch it. And it was hard for a lot of us to do that. But there was something that happened in the movie when we moved through it to say, oh, there's a humanizing of that person. There's an understanding of, why are people buying sex? What is that deep hurt? I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but there's like some points in there where you're going, oh, wow, I get it. And the more that we get to those places, I think, and it's funny for me to be saying that because here I am, advocating for, sex buyers to be held accountable. And it actually does make sense. What I'm, the empathy and the accountability don't cancel each other out.
Totally.
Yeah.
You have to have one to have the other.
Yeah.
You can't have redemption until there's been an intervention. And so accountability is huge, but it's the kind of accountability. I think that's important, kind of what we're getting at. I mean, it's weird being a man because I also was at a point where I just had such disgust for men, even being one, because of all the, all I was doing was just investigating trafficking, hearing the stories of women, seeing the men as perpetrators. And one of the things that really changed my perspective was when I was praying these very precatory prayers about men, and like, God, judge these men, like break in, and my mind's eye imagined this like middle-aged man, and in my prayer, his face turned into like an 11-year-old boy. And I realized in that moment that like nobody wakes up one day and decides to become a perpetrator or a predator or a buyer or a psychopath. Like it's all of these men who are in this really horrible light now were once children.
Right.
And what happened in their life that brought them to that point. And I just think like that was like really helpful for me. And so with buying her, we really tried to give an honest portrayal of their entire life.
Yeah.
And not shy away from like the bad things they've done, but to contextualize it with like, this was their childhood, and this is, how they came to a place of repentance. And like, I just think that whole bigger story is like really important.
So important. Absolutely.
Before we run out of time, I would love to hear kind of your thoughts about where we're at in California right now, on fighting trafficking, the SB 14, and just kind of your pulse on the legislative landscape of what's going down in California.
Sure. Yeah. So last year, SB 14 passed, and that it made it a serious felony to traffic a child. And that was a shocking scenario because the Public Safety Committee, actually everyone pushed back on, most of the committee said that they didn't want to align with that because of the scenarios where an exploiter was a previous victim. And that was their scenario that they were rolling with. And they were kind of lobbying behind that to not make it a serious felony. And this was despite being told, that people were going to jail for with a charge of 10 years for trafficking a child and only serving 2 years. And people don't understand the implications of that, because what an exploiter will tell people is, I'm coming for you in 2 years. So you testify against me, I'm going to get out, because it's not a serious felony. I can plea it down, or I can get out on time served, 2 years, 2 to 4 years tops on a 10-year sentence. And so the exploiter will tell all the people he's running, I will be out in 2 years flat, and I will find you. And so imagine being a 16-year-old and hearing that, and you're not, your family doesn't have like the financial ability to say like, we're leaving from Stockton, or we're going to move somewhere else. We're barely eating. We don't have the ability to move. And maybe, you might be able to get victim of crime dollars and this and that, but 16-year-olds don't know that. Mm-hmm. So they're just like, I'm not talking. I'm not going to tell. And so this was very important to say it was going to be a serious felony, because the people who actually did tell, now I believe it's 80 or 90% of the time has to be served. So that happened last year, and then it went into law in January of this year. This year, we're now fighting SB 1414, which is about making it a felony for buying children. Yeah. And it's just shocking that to buy a child today, like right now, you will only get two days of jail time, and or up to a $10,000 fine. And I promise you, they're not paying $10,000. Yeah. So you might buy a 13-year-old for $500 or $1,000, and you might pay a fine of $250 for buying her if you get cited. I did I didn't do it. Julie Levy did from No More Johns. She did a FOIA of 2012 to 2021, all of the San Francisco PD records on 647B and 236.1, these penal codes that have to do with trafficking and so on. And there were 1,400 records. It was just so telling. First of all, I want to say maybe 10 were identified as women. They didn't have a designation for transgender or non-conforming in their data, so it's male or female. So the majority of the people who were arrested were male, identified as male. Only 5 were booked out of 1,400 people. Only 5 even served the 2 days. And the other astonishing data point is that only 47 of that 1,400 were 18. Why is that important? It's important because when Senator Shannon Grove presented SB 1414 to the Public Safety Committee, I was again mortified to hear Senator Nancy Skinner, who's over Oakland, which is one of the most impacted cities in California. She's over Oakland. Senator Scott Wiener, who's over San Francisco, again, heavily impacted. Senator Wahab, who's over San Jose. Like, these are hot spots, right? And they're over these areas. And the 3 of them, mostly Skinner and Wiener, the 2 of them, just pushed back on this bill and tore it apart left and right with all of these amendments. Wahab is the chair of the Public Safety Committee, so she was the ultimate say, made it a majority vote. And they forced amendments on Shannon Grove that she refused to accept, but was forced to accept. It was the most bizarre. I was in the court. I gave testimony that day, along with a survivor who had been trafficked as a child. And Love Never Fails signed up to sponsor this bill. So that was the reason why I was there speaking on behalf of, I was invited by Senator Grove. And I was just mortified to be in the court with at least 20 survivors of human trafficking. There were 5 people that were there against the bill. And the whole room was filled with supporters of the bill. And people from Oakland, people from their areas that were there to say, I was trafficked in your city as a child and no one stood up for me. And they all said things like 16 and 17-year-olds shouldn't be included in that if you're going to move forward because they're not children or because they could be in a consensual relationship with an 18-year-old that might buy them, or someone might lie and say that they're buying them when they're really in relationship with each other, and they will end up getting put in jail. Let me bring you back to the data point.
Crazy.
Only 47 of the 1,400 people from 2012 to 2021, only 47 of them were 18, and they didn't necessarily just buy children. They could have been buying adults. So what I'm saying here is that only 1% of the buyers represent the cases that they were advocating for, denying the pain of the 1,400 victims that had been purchased, that would not have anybody to stand up for them. So they're trading out 47 18-year-olds for 1,400 victims. And in my mind, there was another comment that was just mind-blowing. The consultants told Shannon Grove's office the day before that, for 16 and 17-year-olds, they need a way to make money in this day and age. So we can't include them. They need a way to make money. That kind of stuff, it just, I have a bad temper, Benji.
Oh, yeah. And also, what's the correlation? Because, whatever, but what we're talking about is criminalizing the purchase.
Yes.
Not the person,
right,
quote unquote, selling.
No.
Which even federal law states that, anyone under 18 in a commercial sex act is a sex trafficking victim.
Yeah.
They're not trying to qualify in and out whether they chose it or not. They're under 18. And
right.
It's a crazy
argument, right?
Argument.
And then, so I have invited, and I was part of a press conference yesterday, and I invited whoever that consultant was, or whoever wants to say that, whatever sex worker, whoever it is, I want you to come and get on East 14th and be out there. Meet me. I'll meet you. Midnight. Come in your underwear. Come in 6-inch heels. And get in these alleyways with these people that are coming, and get in these cars. Because I guarantee you the people who are the loudest voices that are advocating for this are people that are sex workers living in the privacy of their comfortable homes with their regulars that have been doing this for a long time and using their privilege that they have accumulated, the fact that they survived or whatever. Now they're stable and they're years away from being on a street corner, and they're using their privilege and their voice to advocate for an industry to open up that is terrorizing predominantly Black and Latino young ladies.
That's the truth of it.
And that are living in poverty, that don't want that don't want to make money like that.
Yep.
16 and 17-year-olds in a car with an 80-year-old grandpa that smells bad.
Yeah, no.
That's not a choice. That is a choice of no choices. And it's infuriating to me as a survivor of sexual trauma, as a survivor of poverty, of all of these things, of foster care, and then to see it in all the people I represent, and to know they never wanted to be there. They never wanted to be treated that way. And to have someone like say that that's an okay with us as a society, that they would have to do that.
I feel your indignation.
Yeah.
It's well-placed indignation.
Yeah.
You know what we were talking about earlier with the empathy stuff. Empathy is not devoid of anger.
No.
You know, love is not devoid of anger.
Yeah.
Like there's real righteous anger in this. It's, you know, we're not just going around feeling sorry for everyone all the time. Like there are situations that really warrant like an empathetic view, but things like this, common sense laws to protect the vulnerability of children that you refuse to pass in preference of the protection of adults who should know better, is nothing short of just unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah.
And I feel your indignation and your anger, and I am in the same place.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Well, here's the thing. So there's this argument about the carceral system not being the right place to restore people that are sex buying. And I actually agree with that. I agree that a jail is not a good place for a sex buyer to be, and for most people to be, to actually get healing. Okay. But here's the deal. Until you invest the money in remediating that and evolving, creating diversion programs, creating new carceral systems, you cannot ask the victim to pay the price, because that's what you're doing. You're forcing the victim to live in a form of incarceration, to be jailed in their trauma, and to believe that their value is none, while the person who's perpetrated the crime gets to ride on the coattails of, we don't want to do this anymore because you have generational trauma. I get that. I want people who have generational trauma, who have never been taught better, who have been abused themselves. And, I want them to be restored and renewed. Hence the Fight for Love book. Hence I'm for all of these people. But and I think if they really ask themselves a deep question, if it was their daughter, if it was their wife, if there was their mother, they would want justice for them.
Absolutely.
And they will look inside and know that these children deserve better.
When you put it in that lens, just the personal aspect of it, it's undeniable.
Yeah.
And we need to quit playing games and semantics and dancing around narratives. Like it's wrong. And we need to act to protect children, even if that means that some adult men are held accountable for it. So unfortunately, we're out of time. But Vanessa, I really appreciate you and the work that you do and how well-spoken you are about all the things that you're involved with. I think our listeners are really going to love this podcast. And I know this time's been really enjoyable for me. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Benji. Appreciate it. Yeah.
You can check out all our podcast episodes, articles, and films at exoduscry.com and join the daily conversation by following Exodus Cry on all major social platforms.